Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today's session is part of the MEA Series, where we're talking to different leaders in the Azure community across the region, learning from them all about the latest technology updates. And in today's session, we're talking about integration strategies for Dynamics 365 finance and operation apps with Azure. So integration is a key decision factor for any large and mid-sized deployment, especially when there are multiple lines of business applications involved. And in this session, we will learn about the integration design strategies and how Azure Integration Services are helping resolve those challenges within the Dynamics 365 finance and operation apps. So there will be lots of interesting conversations and points to discuss in this session. And as you probably know me by now, my name is Hussam Hussein. I'm the program manager for Microsoft Reactor in this region. We're based in Abu Dhabi as a physical space with extended reach, and community works across the Middle East and Africa region. And I'm always sharing all the interesting learning opportunities and basically everything related to growing in the tech space on my Twitter and LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me. I have the links below. And in today's session, we're hosting Rakesh, who is a lead for the Center of Excellence and a senior solution architect for Dynamics 365 in Tata Consultancy Services. He has more than 20 years of experience in architecting enterprise solutions for different industries, and he's worked on all the releases of Dynamics 365. And he is also a lead for the 365 Dynamics 365 community group for Mumbai, India. And you can connect with him on LinkedIn and his blog as well, which I'm going to share in the chat section. As a reminder, our code of conduct is very simple. We're all here to learn, so please be mindful of each other. Respect all the viewpoints and questions, and be welcoming and respectful and understanding of each other's difference. We're all here to learn again, so let's keep this environment friendly in the comments and in the chat. And feel free to share your thoughts as we cover different parts in this session. Feel free to ask questions, share feedbacks. Maybe let us know as well where you're tuning and watching the session from. Would love to know more about that. I think that's pretty much it for the introduction. Waiting for Rakesh. I think he would need to join us again. Allow me a second in here. And in the meantime, maybe take a minute to check in to the Reactor page where we have all those resources related to today's sessions. Today's session, basically, if you check in, you can opt in and subscribe to our newsletter. That's first. And then second, you will access the modules and the learning paths that are associated with today's topic. This way, you can follow along and continue the learning journey after the session. Right. Allow me a minute. Just all right, Rakesh, I'm adding you to the stream. Welcome. Thank you for joining us and for sharing your experience with our community. We're excited to have you on today's stream. Rakesh, you are on mute.
Am I audible, Hussein?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Hussein and Microsoft Reactor Abu Dhabi for giving me an opportunity to talk. It is great to see all of you taking the time to be here. It's really an honor to have a chance to spend some time. So hi everyone, good afternoon and good evening. So let me get started a little bit about me. My name is Rakesh. I am the lead of Center of Excellence for Dynamics 365 and Supply Chain Management and Senior Solution Architect at TCS. Before I move on to next slide, let me just quickly share my screen, and if someone can confirm whether this presentation deck is visible or not.
Okay, I'm adding your screen.
Okay, I think my screen is visible now. Can you confirm, Hosam?
Yes, all good. I think when I'm off this screen, I'm not audible. All good.
Okay, so my screen is not still visible.
No, everything is all right. It's visible.
Okay, perfect. Makes sense. Okay, so let us just quickly go into about me. So I grew up in the IT. I have been working with Microsoft Stack all of my professional career. Got my start working with Visual C++ and Visual Basic back before I moved into a ERP space in 2009. And later I moved to Dynamics 365 FNO, earlier known as Dynamics 365, that is back in 2005. For the past 15 years out of 20, I've been focused just on the Dynamics 365 FNO space. So at Center of Excellence, my team and I are responsible for guiding customers through their digital transformation journey and helping them modernize their legacy application into modular cloud ERP, and that is Dynamics 365 FNO. I'm also team leader and founder of Mumbai, India Dynamics 365 Power Platform User Group. You can always reach out to me through LinkedIn and Twitter. So one of the things I help customer is with the integration strategy and design, and that is where our topic today. We will try to see a couple of real life examples. How can we try to help customers by understanding the strategy, the key factors and all. So let us talk about our agenda today. So the agenda for this session, we are going to talk about what is integration in ERP, why integration strategies are required, key component of integration strategies, and factors to consider when choosing the integration strategies. And then I want to dig in a little deeper and talk about each part of the strategies for integration, which will be helpful while designing the solution for Dynamics 365 FNO, and predominantly using the Azure Integration Services, also known as AIS. Demo, of course, to give everybody a sense of how easy this stuff can be, and then we will finish it up with little questions and answers. I'm sure Jose must have mentioned this already, but if you do have any questions, please enter those questions in the chat window and I will try to pause from time to time and answer those. Before I start the discussions, I would like to share few acronyms which everybody is familiar within the Dynamics 365 world. However, during the presentation, I probably use a couple of acronyms, that is Dynamics 365 FNO, finance, supply chain management, or finance and operations, or Dynamics 365 ERP. Both are connected to the same product. However, the product name is evolving since Microsoft took over this product from Damgard, and it's been changing constantly. So that is the reason most of the times try to use, and couple of time the name itself is too big to pronounce. So that is the reason probably I'll use a short acronym while going through the presentation slide. There is a couple of jargons and couple of acronyms that is already been documented in the presentation, and I'll frequently use while walking through those presentations, especially like ESB, that is Enterprise Service Bus. Okay, so when we think about the integration in Dynamics 365 FNO world, the key to ensuring a great integration is all about thinking about the data. So data is center for everything, and believe me, with the help of integration strategies and with the use of Azure Integration Services with Dynamics 365 FNO, you will significantly achieve your implementation goal. So by definition, an integration ERP is basically allows you to every aspect of your business process, right from your account receivable, accounts payable, your production planning, your master planning, or maybe in sort of sales and marketing, all needs to be controlled from a single application perspective, right? So data flows seamlessly through the company. So in a nutshell, ERP integration, it allows you to bring the data from the different sources and make sure the critical information should not be missed, and it is derived from a various part of the customer ecosystem, and at the same time try to provide the unified view of the data to the customer after bringing all the data from a different systems. With that, I'll try to quickly move on to next slide. So as I'm connecting with customers as part of implementation journey across the globe, what I'm hearing from them is these 6 big questions, right? So the first question is, what does end-to-end integration landscape look like? We have seen unbelievable shift in the integration stack of Dynamics 365 FNO in the past couple of months, if not in years, and it is perfectly fulfilling the customer integration need, whether it is in manufacturing, financial sector, banking, retail, and consumer product goods. Conventionally, ERP integrations were more complex in nature, and I'm sure you will be agree with me. But that is not because of the complexity of the business processes, but the process and the supported tooling or the right correct strategies and the best practices around, right? As ERP is evolving and it's a center of managing your finance and supply chain management processes, therefore more and more data synchronization activities happening between source and the target system, right? Maybe in a real time and near real time mode. So thereby it is important to define the correct integration strategy. In my experience, integration strategies helps to reduce the complexity and helps customers to build end-to-end integration landscape more robust. And that is where I will try to deep dive more in a subsequent slide, and which will help you to help your customers, to define the integration strategy as well as to correctly redraw the integration architecture. So the next one is what does the error integration and the telemetry capability look like, right? And this is a common question that we heard from different customers. I don't know about you, but I talk to customers, and more than 20 to 30% efforts, overall efforts of your implementation goes into the defining the error handling and mechanism or a telemetry capability if there are no proper solution is in place as far as the integration stack is concerned, right? And as and when you look at, right, and as more and more integration systems are involved, it is very difficult for a IT SPOC or admin guy to understand the failure pattern, because failure can happen at any end, maybe at a source end or maybe at a target end, right? So take an example just for a discussion, right? The orders are getting recorded in a different systems, and those orders are being managed into integration stack, which is coming to a finance and operation app for the fulfillment purpose, right? And shipment is also managing through another location. In this scenario, if something goes wrong because of the complexity of the integration, and manager reported that issue to the IT admin, and IT admin team is trying to basically dig out what went wrong, whether it is an issue with the source end, whether it's an issue with the target end, right? And they could not able to figure out because no proper strategies applied, no proper mechanism or the best practices, or for that matter, any sort of tooling experience is used. The next question is, how do we build a more resilient integration path for releases or new changes that is happening? Because often we have seen, or I also seen in a multiple implementation, that customer wants to do the implementation of finance and operation app in a more phased manner, right? So that is where this question comes into picture. And day by day, integration has become more robust and the versatile with the evaluation of ERP system. Therefore, it is very important to fully understand the requirement for each integration touch point, whether it is a requirement of third-party integration with the ERP, or whether it's any in-house or any sort of line of business integration requirement, right? And then define the integration strategy, especially when you think about having a minimum changes when business is asking to accommodate new change or some sort of be part of the existing landscape, right? So those sort of challenges comes into picture if you do not have any specific proper strategy in place. And when it comes to involvement of activity of any sort of new changes or existing changes to modify, it includes right from your understanding of the requirement of integrations as well as until the changes move to the production system of FNO. The next question is, how are our vendors and third-party application going to connect securely to our ERP system, right? Because as and when you are bringing more and more data, right, the security is the top priority. And as the data is center for every business transaction, it is critical to define the strategy to secure the data during transit as well as having a secret key to store at a secure place. Next question is, how do you maintain the track changes of integration and accommodate the business need with less rework, right? Often I have seen a small changes as part of integration also required, a lot of time to understand and fix or maybe redevelop or until deployment, right? So we have seen that managing the change of integration such as schema or some sort of business logic, etc., is so important when there is a complexity of integration touch points are involved, right? So in fact, as you keep changing the same integration touch point multiple times and bringing a new change, it is difficult to keep a track of previous changes if there is no proper version controlling support in place. And lastly is accelerating the deployment and testing process of phases. As customers think about to go with the phase-wise manner of implementation, it is very, very important to understand this point that how can we accelerate the deployment of integration changes or for that matter testing. So think about a scenario where you have done some changes in the sales order outbound integration logic and you are trying to complete the testing and deployment activities also planned across the deployment across the environment, and you are literally stressed to complete the testing on time due to a lengthy process because there's a dependency with multiple processes. So in a nutshell, how do you accelerating the deployment and testing process, right? So these are some of the big questions hearing from customer at top of mind for them. So okay, so let us move ahead and talk about key component of integration strategy for Dynamics 365 with Azure. So integration strategy basically provides guidance and hands-on guide to consultants and architects, right? And why it is important in Dynamics 365 FNO integration world, because when you design your integration, usually you start gathering the business requirement and trying to understand the characteristics, and based on the characteristics, you want to pick the right strategy to satisfy the business requirement, right? And of course, being aware of integration strategy is very useful, and it actually helps to speed up the process, standard way of approach, and also way of improving the quality what you do on average, right? However, there might be some unique case where your strategy is not applied, which is also a standard example in my experience. So let us talk about integration strategy, and particularly when you think about integration at larger context, as you should with Dynamics 365 FNO, because FNO is not the only system in the entire ecosystem, right? When you try to do the implementation, typically there will be multiple systems, whether it's an internal system, on-premises system, or for that matter, any sort of third-party system. Otherwise, you would not actually really do anything, right, with the strategies. So let us understand one by one. So one of them, for example, is direct web services call. So typically what that implies is a synchronous call to using web services technology or protocol like SOAP. In this strategy, there is no direct connection with target system. There is nothing wrong in it as it. But when you think about more complex integration scenarios where you have multiple endpoints are involved and those multiple endpoints are talking to each other, so typically it is a good idea to use middleware just to simplify the couple of endpoints, and those endpoints are talking to each other, and that is where other strategy comes into a picture. So you do not have each 10 point talking to each other endpoints, and then might be end up with different scenarios, like situation like an spaghetti type of architecture, or maybe some sort of n square sort of information, right? When you have the complexity of the multiple endpoints and not having the proper middleware in place. But when you have a middleware, then obviously it is going to resolve the challenges of spaghetti type of architecture, and it will be n plus one endpoints, right? Typically, a middleware is having a separate endpoints for each one. So think about a scenario: if you have an endpoint, then that endpoint in the middleware, for each of the endpoints, it is going to be communicated directly, and it is a lot better than the direct web service call to a target system. Next component of strategy is message queue. It is an asynchronous communication through queue manager, something like conventionally we used to use MSMQ and IBM right? So this falls under the category of message queue. Then there is a message broker, which provides routing and transformation with guarantee. And I often see in that this is one of the common scenario, or rather a strategy in the Dynamics 365 FNO world, where customer is typically using their on-premises system, and those on-premises systems are currently being using a ESB like Bistalk or Dell Boomi, or for that matter, web methods, and customer don't want to invest additional money for the any sort of additional component to, or a middleware for that matter, right? So basically, you can use a different communication protocol. That is the biggest advantage having a message broker with this technology. However, often it is used for external B2B sort of scenarios, or internal integration like EAI, like other cloud or on-premises system in your ecosystem. So this is the main factor to be taken into consideration when there is a message broker involved, or message broker sort of strategies are involved. Often, as you will see, the multiple customers and providers of data, right? So there will be multiple consumers, multiple providers are there, right? In those sort of scenarios, your messages to a broker and may not be directly subscribed to the subscriber. So you do not have to invest your time to build those messages again and again. The subscriber will, automatically who will be interested to, able to pick that up as soon as you set up that endpoints by sending that messages. Then the service bus, as same as the idea of the message broker. However, it supports for web service technologies, including the discovery mechanism and ability to deal with the metadata management for those services. So when there is a need for real world of metadata management activities in the context of web service technology, then service bus comes into picture, and that is where our demo as well. So where we will try to see how can we make sure the service bus is installed using the Azure Service Bus service. Next one is business process automation, which is end-to-end automation process for application across multiple systems. And the unique fact of this particular thing is it is a long-running business process. So in addition to this, typically it involves real-time monitoring of the business processes and rule management in your business process automation. And finally, entity synchronization and service applications. So basically, it is a consolidated view of enterprise-wide business entity, including synchronized update or consumption by different applications across multiple applications within the ecosystem. If I just talk about the best example of this particular strategy is exposing the virtual entity, like concept like a virtual agent, right? This is the best example of entity synchronization and service application. It is also a strategy for entity synchronization, as I mentioned earlier, right? Now let us deep dive and understand the key factors to consider when choosing the integration strategies. So right now, until now, we have understood some of the key factors which will help you to define the strategies. Now we will deep dive inside those factors, right, and how those factors are going to help you. So I'll go one by one. However, the slide is self-explanatory, and due to time constraint, I will not go into detail of each and every point. However, those are common in nature, typically demand by the customers and the business requirement predominantly, whether it's a functional and non-functional requirement. We will try to go into more detail in that. So this is basically a characteristic that what we discussed in the previous slide, right? A sort of information where you need to understand the order to select the right integration strategy, right? So whether it's a strategy of entity synchronization or a business process automation or a service bus for that matter, or a message broker, right? So these are the typical characteristics. So say for example, take example of latency. So in other words, it is a synchronous integration call where immediate response is required, and that will be typically driven by your business requirement, or alternatively, can it be asynchronous integration, right? Where you are triggering an integration and you either do not require response at all, or only require delay response, or require a response after a call was made successfully. So these three conditions falls under the category if it is a asynchronous one, right? And that will be done potentially when the later the call is established successfully. You may categorize this latency factor as a near real time as well. In other words, where a latency is minimal. We will see in a subsequent slide what is the latency and what should be the latencies required, whether it's less than 1 second or 1 milliseconds and all. So typically, we might think of near real time, which is a less than minute being allowed between triggers and the transmission of results, right? So when you say the less than a minute, it consists of both your trigger and the transmission of the results. Then we will talk about next factor, which is message routing. In other words, it is point to point, right? Something like ESB, enterprise service bus, what we have seen in previous slide, right? Like a BizTalk, or it is more of a hub and spoke sort of mechanism, or some kind of a message broker info, like sort of information. For example, you are talking about a data migration type pattern, and you are trying to extract the load and trying to validate the extracted load, and again loading that transformation as operation, right? So those sort of information that provided by technology like SQL Server Integration Services, or maybe Azure Data Factory. So you can leverage that sort of information when it comes to a message routing and when you try to define your integration strategy. Then one of the most important thing that you need to understand about your integration requirement is the frequency, right? So in other words, how often will this call be made? And you could classify that, right? Ideally, you could specify or classify whether it's a hard number, but failing that, it is an initial survey of the requirement, right? So when you do an initial understanding of the requirement, either you can define a hard number, or you can simply go with the details that into maybe high, medium, or low, where high could be a second or minute, medium could be hours or delay, and low could be weeks or even months for a long running transaction across the systems. Another thing is the trigger, right? In other words, what prompts the execution of this integration? So for example, if someone is just manually acting upon one of the business process, that is your one of the trigger, right? Is that something that on demand or a manual, right? And it is manually initiated by either an end user or someone like an IT person, or is it triggered by an event? So that event can be initiated automatically and that has been triggered, right? So obviously a perfect example of trigger in the Dynamics 365 context is the business event. In other words, something happens in a software, and as a result of that, message is sent, and from a source to destination. So that is where something is triggered in one application, and as a result, a message is being sent to that application, and you receive a response back based on the strategy that you adopted. Alternatively, an event could be a receipt of a such message. So I have seen a couple of examples where event could be a receipt as of that particular message as well. And finally, trigger could be, that is schedule on the basis of time and date, but cannot be predetermined schedule. So these are the key points that need to take into consideration as far as the trigger as a factor to be considered when you define the strategy. So continuing with the factors to be considered, what kind of operation is it required, right? Whether it's operation of create, update, delete, or maybe for that matter, particular target entity. Is it an action defined on that based on these create, update, delete events is going to be fire, or something like calculated of sales order price. That is a classic example in this context of event. So it is sort of important to classify your business need into a sort of operations, right? So you may have a single integration handling multiple different operations you can club with that event. And couple of points that you need to understand that how those operations are going to design your interface. So typically your events can be fired, as I mentioned earlier, right, on a button click. Let us talk about batching. This is one of the key aspect when it comes to asynchronous call, and one of the factors while choosing the integration strategy. So if there are multiple pieces of data in a message, or maybe multiple requests that are sent together, those needs to be in a one batch to a single record. So at the end of the day, it will be pushed as a single individual record and as an integration request, or they batch together with a multiple request in a single protocol message, right? Then just as important as frequency is the volume, right? Volume or a transfer protocol, right? So say for example, again, you could be specify the volume number in a number format, or you could start by just classifying them as a low, medium, high, and that might can be help you to inform the strategy and to define the correct. It's up to you how you want, based on your understanding of the requirement, how you are defining that numbers for this particular volume or a transport protocol. So say for example, high volume, you probably would not want to choose a synchronous mechanism, right? Which is but obvious. And you would probably want to choose a mechanism that allows some sort of parallelism of a processing, right? So that way you can define the volume, and based on the defining of volume, whether it's high, medium, and low, you can certainly go back and look at the integration strategy, right? Whether it's asynchronous call is required or a synchronous call is required. The next one is the transport protocol are obviously important. Web services typically they are following over HTTP, but when it comes to a RESTful JSON API, right? So we need to also take into consideration what is the your transport protocol involves, whether it's a file format and all those stuff. The next one is the data mapping, which is typically called as metadata definition. For example, if you have a couple of endpoints and you need to pick one of them as, unless they happen to be essentially identical endpoints, then there will be tend to be some sort of schema translation required between them, right? Because both are not in identical in nature. So in that case, you can have this kind of data mapping to be defined. For example, the canonical format can also be reusable use, which will also help you to require to meet the need for the all different endpoints. So if you have all different endpoints, and if you want to go for a common format sort of, you can go for the canonical format of options. Next one is the error handling and the reconciliation, which is very important. In other words, there's some kind of a user interface which gets triggered based on the success or failure or status of the call. Think about a scenario if integration fails and you need to have some sort of console which you need to broker, and all those kind of information, give you one place to manage it for multiple integrations. So that is where the error handling and reconciliation comes into picture. So all of these are not even necessarily functional requirements, as I mentioned in the beginning, but though not necessarily this should be the non-functional requirement. Like this can be a very critical factors, in choosing the right strategy for your integrations. Now let us move on to the next slide, and then I'll try to quickly walk you through what should be the real life scenario, if at all, if you want to just adopt one of the strategies in your implementation. So as far as the integration technologies is concerned within the Dynamics 365 app, we do have two options available. The one in the context of business requirement, which is the real-time integration and the asynchronous integration. The real-time integration can be achieved using the REST API, OData protocol, or if some of the requirements is not fulfilling with the OData protocol, you can certainly go for custom services. Keep the payloads and business logic small enough to complete the call, less than the 1 seconds for high latency, and not more than should be 5 to 10 seconds. It allows you to exchange data synchronously and invoke the actions via services, right? So typically it's a tight couple call, as in I try to explain the example as well, where you are editing a data in Excel in a mobile application, right? Dual write is also one of the example that also falls under the category of real integration. Whereas in the asynchronous pattern of integration within the Dynamics 365 FNO, it can be a near real time. Okay, one of the example is the business event. However, it is a loosely coupled, and if at all, if you want to, you can just simply go for some sort of batch running process, maybe during the office after the office hours and weekly export of GL summary and so on and so forth, right? uh, Asynchronous pattern typically used as a choice for maybe high volume. So okay, so if there are high volume transaction, you can certainly go for asynchronous pattern. Either you go for a recurring DIXF or package API sort of information within the financial operation app. Now let us deep dive quickly into next 5 or 10 minutes or so, and towards the end I'll just quickly walk you through the demo, and if there are any few questions, I'll open the floor for the questions. So this is a first strategy deep dive where your OData based integration calls. So think about a scenario and try to read the slide from your left to right, where you can see here the external system, which is having the call with the Dynamics 365 FNO, whether it's a create, update, and delete, and getting a response from Dynamics 365. In terms of the categorization of the mode, it's a synchronous, and the message routing method is the point-to-point, because that is where the OData and the point-to-point bidirectional comes into picture. The frequency of this is hourly, and trigger is the external. So trigger is the external system, where external system will trigger this call as and when it is required as part of the external system business process. The volume consideration is medium here, and that is where the OData technology comes into picture. However, the data mapping, because of the less complexity involved, data mapping is using the non-canonical model, right? As far as the error handling is concerned, or in sort of error reconciliation is concerned, external system is responsible to manage that. So the point to address in this, to be highlighted in this slide, is to reuse this slide if at all, if you want to use in your presentation or in your implementation, understand how this strategy can be applied using the OData bidirectional call, right? The next strategy deep dive with the help of Logic App using the file-based integration. So think about a scenario: you do have a system, external system, which is in on-prem, and the entire stack is running in cloud, right? And customer wants to exchange the files between FNO and the external system. However, the external system, as I mentioned, the on-prem, right? So how can we leverage the cloud ERP data mechanism using the REST protocol, right? So it's an asynchronous process. However, in this case, the message routing is used as a broker. This is also one of the strategy what we have seen in the previous slide. So as a broker, we are using the Logic App, which is connected to the file local, the SFTP file, XML file folder location, and having a asynchronous call with the Dynamics 365 FNO. It's asynchronous in nature. That's the reason it is scheduled. So trigger is going to be scheduled, and the error handling mechanism is going to be into three aspects. One is a Logic App. If something is failed at a FNO end, then you can look up for the errors in the DIXF or external system as well. Then the strategy deep dive 3, where more complicated. So as you see in the strategy 1, we just simplified the approach of how can we integrate the OData between external system and FNO. In the second deep dive, we try to see how can we have the on-premises version. But here, we just try to add the additional layer of the ESB, that is Enterprise Service Bus, and the services from the Azure that I'm using is the Azure Service Bus. The functional or the business requirements remain the same. The external system is having the XML file folder inside the on-premises, and the other stack is running in cloud. It is an asynchronous call. However, in this strategy, we are using the broker as well as the ESB. Okay. So what happens is when the external system sends the file, the files or the message goes to a service bus, and service bus within the Logic App, the service bus automatically triggers the Logic App, and FNO gets the information. It is again a schedule based. That is how the trigger has been defined for this particular deep dive of a strategy. It's not required because there is less complexity in terms of multiple integration touch points or multiple external system. That is where the non-canonical model approach, data mapping approach is being used. However, for error handling and reconciliation, you need to see the logic app as well as DAXApp or external system, or for that matter, Azure Service Bus. The next strategy deep dive, that is strategy number 4, is the middleware and the logic app. And now, as you can see, this one is more complex than the previous strategy number 1, 2, and 3, right? So the complexity involves where customers is already having the middleware, which is running in their on-premises, and they are trying to leverage the FNO data with the help of the existing middleware ESB, for that matter, whether it's a web method or a BizTalk or a Dell Boomi. So in this scenario, Azure on-premises application gateway is required, which try to connect to the Logic app as a broker, and then Logic app is having having a connection with the SFTP, which is running in cloud. Okay. As far as the message routing is concerned, it's a broker ESP. This is another pattern as compared to the previous one, and it's a scheduled one. However, the volume of this particular pattern is medium, it's not that high. And since the complexity of middleware comes into picture, because this particular middleware, though we are highlighting an external system, but there might be multiple endpoints from a different system to a middleware. That is where the canonical model for data mapping approach needs to be taken into consideration, what we have seen in the earlier slide as part of strategy. Then we'll move on to next slide, where strategy deep dive 5, where it's typically a event driven or pubs up sort of information, where publisher will publish an event and the message will be configured at the first place. No need to configure again. However, based on a subscriber, new subscriber will try to subscribe the message and that event. So as you can see in the slide deck, the external systems is trying to push the information on the basis of events. Events goes to our service bus. You can also try to flip the situation of the scenario where your journey of the transaction is happening from FNO. FNO, there is a trigger happen within FNO, which calls the service bus as an endpoint, and the endpoint is configured inside Logic app, which automatically triggers the Logic app workflow and then automatically push the information to the external. So it is up to business requirements, how you understood requirements, how you classify those requirements and bucket out those requirements into a specific integration strategies, and try to consider the factors, the 5-10 factors that I discussed earlier, right? So try to apply those factors to your strategy and see. So in this particular scenario, there is no need for the data mapping using the canonical model, because there is no ESB involved in the on-prem. There is less complexity in terms of multiple endpoints. However, it is an event-based, where it's good for the Azure Integration Services consumption model, where you are going to pay only required when there is a trigger or when there is an event is going to be happen in one of the applications, whether it is in external system or whether it is in Dynamic 365 FNO. Right. So with that, I'll take a pause here. If there are any questions, I'll probably try to address those, or I will try to quickly share my screen, and we will try to look into the demo. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just quickly first walk you through the key components that is required to be set up the scenario. So the scenario is like this. We are going to create a payment journal in Dynamics 365 FNO. As soon as you post the customer payment journal in Dynamics 365 FNO, we have already configured the business event as an endpoint of service bus with topic. And then as soon as the service bus topic gets the trigger from FNO, it automatically executes the Logic app, which consists of combination of service bus, and it automatically sends the email to my email ID. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll just quickly walk you through the required setup within the Azure, and then we'll quickly run through the scenario. Okay, so from a component perspective, you need a couple of things. The very first thing, you need the Azure Service Bus namespace. So basically, namespace is the component where you will need to configure your topic and the relevant category of subscriptions. So topic, I will not go into detail what is topic and subscription in the interest of time, but the point to be highlighted here, I have created a service bus, Azure Service Bus namespace. Underneath of that, I have created topic. You can also go for a queue. Again, it is based on your requirements. So I have created a topic underneath of that namespace that I have created, that is SB underscore namespace. And inside the topic, I have created the subscriptions. Okay, and that subscription is attached to my particular legal entity. So I'll just quickly go and show you how I created the subscription inside the topic. So if you just go inside the subscription underneath of the topic, you would see I have created a subscription called USMF. And why USMF? Because I need to create the transaction. You can create as many as subscription based on the legal entity reference that you want, based on your business requirement. So these are the key setups are required. In addition to this, when the endpoints are going to be set up in a business event, you need a key vault. So that is where the key vault service is also leveraged, which is connected to the Azure service namespace and the topic, and the same secret information is already been captured as part of your business event. So I'll just quickly run through that business event. So you need to navigate to the system admin module, business event catalog. If you go to the endpoints, I have created the endpoint for service bus topic. If you want to create a new one, you can go ahead and create the endpoint type. So it does support multiple endpoint type, which is the Azure Service Bus queue, Azure Service Bus topic, event grid, event hub, or any sort of HTTPS endpoint and Azure Blob Storage. So for today's demo, I have selected the Azure Service Bus topic, which is already configured here with the required secret key information. And also I'm going to also I have attached the activate the events for that. So I have selected a payment posted event. So if you want to activate the event, you just select the required event and activate. Automatically that particular event is going to tag to that particular endpoint. So I'll just quickly go and try to post the customer payment journal. So as you can see here, I'm into customer payment journal header information. I will create customer payment journal header. I'll select the account. I already created the dummy customer in my instance and the USMF legal entity, that is cus-001. Let's say 5 USD. I'm going to offset the bank account. So as soon as I post the journal, the way we have configured the business events on the posting of this payment journal, behind the scenes, it automatically calls the Azure Service Bus topic and the subscriptions. We can quickly look into it, Logic app. So I'll just open the Logic app that I have created. First, we will see the execution history as I already posted the journal. And then I'll quickly walk you through how I configured the Logic app with on the basis of trigger of Azure Service Bus. So as a result, I should get an email message in my mailbox, maybe after a few seconds, based on the email service. Okay, so as you can see here, we have seen the succeeded log here in the Logic app, and we also received the email automatically. So if I just open the email, you would see here the way I have configured the email subject, the email body. Now I'll go back and show you how I configure the Logic app. So I'm going to open the Logic App Designer inside the Azure portal. Alternatively, if you have you can also open in Visual Studio if you have that extension installed in the Visual Studio. Apologize for delay. Okay, so as you can see here, there is a one trigger and there are two steps. So the trigger is when a message is received in a topic subscriptions with the using a flag of autocomplete. And just to give you a brief background, if I go with this autocomplete option, as and when the message received in the topic subscriptions and the message is perfectly queued without any issue, after processing that message, it is going to be automatically deleted. That is where the autocomplete, and as a best practice, we should go for autocomplete only. I have selected the topic name, which I configured earlier as part of topic and the subscription name. And also the select the subscription type as a main, and the default time for the recurrence is 3 minutes. Sorry. Then I use the parse JSON. It is required for generate your payload, which you can easily download from your business event catalog. If I just quickly go back here in the business event, in the system admin module, and select your respective business event, and you can download the schema. The same schema I have copied and pasted over here with little bit changes in terms of data types, whether it's a number and an integer. So I just modify those in the parse JSON, as you can see here, which is business event ID, a cash discount, whatever that part of that payment journal payload as part of that event. And then using another step just to send the email, I just format the body here and the subject and send it to my email address. So that is how it is, how easy you can quickly do that when there is a, when there is some AI, Azure Integration Services are to be only part. Any questions? Okay, so if I just try to reiterate about this whole change that I have done for the Logic app and the integration, if you just try to run through the scenario and the understanding. So we have a business event trigger from finance and operation app, and then we have a service bus endpoint which is connected to that event, business event inside the finance and operation app, and that service bus event as a trigger is configured in Logic app. So as and when the message received at topic subscription level, it automatically executes this particular information and execute a Logic app, right? So if you just go back and look at the history of that executed Logic app, you would see all the triggers and actions successfully, completed. So you can check here, my trigger got successfully executed, my steps, both the steps got successfully executed. So this way you can also do the monitoring and some sort of error handling in case if the execution of trigger and steps are not successfully executed for some valid reasons. So I think that's all from my end for today. So Hussein,
All right, thank you, Rakesh. And we have a few minutes to take some questions, and I highly encourage everyone from the community members to use this time to ask our expert speaker questions about today's session. Right. I see some questions coming through. I will just share my screen as well for important links, actually. The meetup community where you can be part of all the reactors actually that are close to you. We are all streaming our sessions, especially speaking for Abu Dhabi and for the MEA reactor. We're streaming all our workshops across the region, so you can join live, ask questions, and if you miss any session, this is where the YouTube channel comes in handy. All the sessions are available on demand. Like today's session, for example, we're streaming it directly to YouTube as well. So whenever we're done, you can always go back to it. And you can also follow us on Twitter, sign up to the newsletter. This is a monthly curated newsletter with all the interesting happenings across the reactor. So this is a way to stay informed about what is happening and not miss any of the interesting topics that you would love to see. As always, we love to hear your feedback. So if you have gone onto the check-in, which I put back on the screen, if you go to the short link, aka.ms reactor check-in, and use the event ID for today's session, first you will get access to the module that Rakesh recommended, and also you will have access to the reactor survey where we get to listen and learn from you all about the topics that you would love to see, and we keep those in mind for future programming. You can also connect with us on different socials and on Meetup. Send us a comment. You know, we're all across all these channels. We are available and responding and interacting and listening to this feedback. And we've been doing lots of sessions in this MEA series that are based on this feedback. So quick question, Neil is asking if you can show the configuration for the service bus.
Okay, so Neil, the information of detail in talks.com. Maybe I'll share the link with you, and you can follow the path. Just quickly paste the link over here. There you go.
I'll put it on the screen as well. So you'll find the link in the chat as well. Click there to follow along. All right, Ayan is saying thank you, great session, and I would also echo that. Thank you, Rakesh, for today's session and for joining us to talk to our community all about what's happening in this space and how they can continue the journey after the sessions. We'd love to have you in the future as well. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure having you, and stay tuned for more sessions as part of the Reactor MEA series, and also part of lots of series that we're running across the globe, talking about AI, data science, DevOps, and all the interesting happenings from the technology space. This was Hussam. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Hussam. Thank you all.